Hey there, welcome to the Culture Studios podcast. I'm Chad, and I'm here with
Lex. Hey.
So, right before we get into the episode, we want to make sure you like, share, subscribe, whatever you do. It's great to help us, support us, and lets us know that you're watching, listening, and supporting us. So today, and we're going to go through probably with everybody else and kind of get their whole take on this, but with different episodes, with everybody on the culture team. But I think there's this very hard thing in life when you become not a kid anymore.
Right.
And that is, being content, being in this state of like, I think a lot of times we chase fulfillment.
Yes.
And so I think a lot of times we're living in chasing fulfillment versus being content versus being in fulfillment.
Right.
Because I think for myself, a lot of times too, like I realized that I think I was more in the pursuit of fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
And where I could have been in fulfillment because my perspective wasn't totally correct.
Right. That's
and
good.
so I was chasing fulfillment and not living in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, kind of get your journey through that, because we all kind of go through that little bit of a journey. So kind of what's your journey with that? Fulfillment, contentment, all that jazz.
Well, when you say that, I think about how we're literally raised up in that as a kid in the school system with our parents.
Yeah.
In the city that you grow up in. And so for me personally, I remember, in kindergarten, they're like, oh, you could be whatever you want to be.
Right.
The sky's the limit. You literally could be, if you want to be an astronaut.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be. And so we grow up thinking that, like, oh, I could do anything I want.
Yep.
All I have to do is just, I guess, move towards that.
Yeah.
And then I remember also in my region, in Rhode Island, that's where I come from, they're very, like, liberal. I'm trying to find the word.
No, you just say it. You just say it. Yeah.
So they're like, yeah, your own thing. You do that. You must go to college. You must do this.
Yeah.
And so you grow up thinking that, and then you hit adulthood, and you're like, wait, that's a lot more than I expected to get there.
Yeah.
And so I think having that mentality kind of like jacked me up. And because when I did try to do that specific thing, I never felt fulfilled until I was that very thing that I thought I should be.
Sure.
And so also just when you're not in the Lord's will, then there's always going to be something that you want to chase. There's always like some sort of void.
Sure.
And so it just becomes this like never ending discontentment cycle.
Right. And I think that's a lot of times where depression can come from. Right. Especially when you're on the side of it where you're looking out and people that maybe you went to high school with, that you went to, even college, or like even that you're going to church with, you start seeing them having success in different areas. Right. And you start realizing, like, in whatever you defined as fulfillment, now they're doing. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, man, like, I wish I could do this. So that it creates it can create a lot of unhealthy things. It can lead to jealousy. It can lead to, there's so many things it can lead to. And then, but in the basis of it all, and because we were having a discussion before we were taping, and one of the things too was, when you're looking at what you're chasing, do you even know what you're chasing? Right. Like what fulfillment? Because, if you're chasing a job, have you looked at the person, or let's say a position? Have you looked at the person that holds that position?
Right. Like you see behind the scenes.
Right.
A whole other.
Like, are you happy with where their family's at? Because the temptation always is, well, when I get there, it's going to be different.
Right.
It's not true. It's not true. Because I think that's my favorite thing is especially watching, like, because now I'm about to hit 30 in 2 years. Oh so now I can say officially, watching people that are half my age say, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this better than this person. And you're like, sweetheart. That's exactly what I thought 15 years ago. Right. And you can. There are obviously different scenarios, but
if you're meant to do that.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. Yeah, if you're meant to do it. And that's kind of like what we're talking about with fulfillment is, are you chasing something? Because this is where you have to dissect things and break things down is, are you chasing something because, your parents pushed it at a young age? Are you doing it because a teacher pushed it, because of a friend group pushed it? Right. Are you doing it because, hey, you watched a TV show growing up?
I want to be that.
And that's what you aspire to be? Because that's, you listen to people's stories, and everyone's story is completely different of why they got into whatever they got into. Right. I wanted to be a preacher. Mm-hmm. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a preacher. And I went to ministry school with the mindset that I was going to be some type of minister in some way. Mm-hmm. And what ends up coming out is no, like I good behind the scenes and things like that. And like, I realized like, oh, I have fulfillment when I'm doing that. Right. Not that I didn't have fulfillment, because I would speak at rehab centers and speak at different things, and it would be good, but it was like there was something about supporting someone else that was bigger than me, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And knowing like I can't, like, supporting the people that had the voices of our generation and going, hey, you know what? I don't have that voice. Right. So if I can support that voice. So that's what I started realizing where my fulfillment was coming in at a young age. And that's the last time I really felt fulfillment for like years, because I realized like what I did was I chased a ladder. Mm-hmm. So instead of being content,
success.
Exactly. So instead of being content with where I was at, and while yeah, by the world standards it wasn't successful, mm-hmm. but I was getting fulfillment out of it, I left that area and went to what would be and is considered a higher ladder, mm-hmm. right? In a higher position and whatnot. And so what I did was I sat in a position I never was fulfilled. Like for 6 years, I'm sitting there going, this is the thing that I was growing up now in this, profession, and going, I'm not fulfilled. Like I don't get the fulfillment I had early on. And so one of the things was going back to your first love, which is, right. It's funny because it relates to that in your job and all this stuff, but it also relates that into your love with Jesus. Right. Because a lot of times I think one of the biggest things we'll do is we'll chase something that was never in our design. Mm-hmm. And then we'll go, well, God, why didn't you make this a success? And we'll blame God, but we weren't chasing God. We were chasing a thing, or we were chasing a scenario, Right.
That's good. And also with that, when you begin to chase something that you were never meant to do, right? Like I said earlier, it's always going to be some sort of rat race.
Yeah.
And then the ladder of success, like the problem with that is that there's never an ending. Like,
no.
Where's the ending?
Exactly.
Like, there's always going to be something
you fall off.
Better.
That's yeah.
So it's like unrealistic in that term.
Yeah.
But another thing that I was saying earlier with the whole, like, we grew up with the teachers and
yeah.
In the church, it's the same thing.
It's really true.
Like growing up, like, or prophecies, or
100%.
Like you're gonna do this and you're gonna do that, and then it doesn't happen, and then you're just like,
right. And I think I think the thing that's so common for us in church is a lot of times is it's a different terminology in different places, but we're kind of left holding the bag in a lot of areas, like, because you have people that come in. Because my church, when I was younger, before I really was, I would say, serving the Lord, we'd have preachers come in and speakers come in, and they would do prophecy, mm-hmm. and they would say, hey, you're going to be this, you're going to be that. And you're like, especially as a kid, you're like, well, when's that going to happen?
Right.
Because you have a different mindset. So then you think, then you're at your 9 to 5 and you're looking around going,
right.
This isn't it.
Me. I was like, yo, they said that I was going to be in the stage in front of all, and I'm like,
right. And so
it jacked me up as a teenager.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's the thing. It could set, but that's the thing. Then you start chasing those things.
Yes, that was the thing. Yeah.
And so for you, how did you kind of like get out of that? How did you like? What was there a defining moment, or were there defining moments that kind of led you to where you broke out of that?
Well, I realized one day, it's just, I went through a healing journey.
Sure.
And so with that, I was like, okay, so none of the things that I'm doing is working. I keep losing friends. I keep going through these betrayal cycles. What's going on? And so one day, I asked a few people, and they told me what it was. And I was like, ouch.
Yeah.
But I wanted to hear it because I wanted to get better.
Yeah.
And so even though it hurt, I was like, okay, Lord, I'm going to take this to you. And I obviously need to be working on myself, because I thought I was the stuff.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm not. So
yeah.
And so I had to sit there and like really evaluate all the things that led me up to that point, the traumatic situations that, took place, all those things, and really work on it.
Right.
And so I'm still working on some things now, but I'm at the point where I'm like, one day I was just like, I am fulfilled because I'm a daughter. So if I just do what God is telling me to do and be obedient in that, I'm going to feel that fulfillment, no matter if I'm there to where he wants me to be,
right? Or
just like, we're always walking towards that.
Yeah.
We're always working towards it. We're never coming to a place where we arrive.
Yeah.
And so with me personally, that's what took place and led me up to this moment of, okay, whenever I'm walking in what God has wanted me to do, I feel that fulfillment.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think the other thing too is like with that, like your fulfillment and got redefined.
Right.
Like what you were chasing got redefined. And I think a lot of times for me, one of the biggest things that I realized is I was always looking at other people beside me.
Right.
And I would go, well, if I'm doing better than them,
then I'm doing good.
Then I'm doing good. And I think that's where I just got stuck in this whole thing. And then eventually had to realize like I needed to leave it all.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the ironic thing is I still now flash forward basically 2.5 years, 3 years after I left all of that, I'm still involved with what I was doing, but in a completely different way now.
Not what you would have expected.
Not even close. I didn't even think this was possible on this side. And so, but the crazy thing about it all though, is it's brought fulfillment because I feel like, okay, I'm in the will of God now. I'm able to spend time with my family.
Right.
I'm not restricted in all these different ways where I used to be. And what's great too is I get to rub shoulders with other ministries and help other ministries out, but then I also get to help my local church out.
Right.
And so what's cool too is you're in the same boat.
Yes.
You know, it's cool because like, you know, you're involved in our local church. You have your own type of ministry and whatnot where you're ministering different girls and you have different podcasts and different things like that. Because there's a lot of things that you're launching now, like it's in your physical ministry. And and so it's cool because like for you were chasing something and now like you have 2 beautiful kids, you have a husband, like all these different things. But you were chasing all these other things that might not have ever led you to that point.
Exactly.
Because the other thing a lot of times is, and this is what I was talking about in the beginning, is what you're chasing for the fulfillment, where does it end? Because with me, a lot of things I was chasing, I was realizing a lot of the people that were where I was wanting to be were single, divorced, you know, never saw their kids, was always on the road. Like, and I'm going, oh,
same.
Is that really where I want to end up?
Right.
You know?
And then when you got to know them and got closer, they were miserable human beings.
Exactly.
So you're like, all this, because, you know, the gifts are without repentance.
Yep.
And so you're like looking behind the scenes and I'm like, Lance, is that what life is? Like we're doing all this just to end up like that? That's not what I want.
Right.
And so eventually I was like that type of person that had to do everything. Like I wanted to do, not had to do everything. I wanted to be involved in so many different things. Like I was involved in insurance companies. I was involved in like health coaching. I was involved in fashion and this and that. And so I went to chase different things to, I guess, be able to grow and I guess be the one that was climbing that ladder, like you said.
Sure.
But after a while, I'm like, there's more than this.
Yeah.
And I didn't even want to be a mom in that moment because we were always running. And so I'm like, I don't want to slow down right now.
Yeah.
But that feeling of not being fulfilled crept up on me. And I'm like, it has to be more than this.
Right.
I'm supposed to be a mom. I'm supposed to, you know, settle down and put roots somewhere. And so right when I finally decided to do that, put roots down, everything started to flourish and open up for me. All the things I ever wanted to do. And I'm like, okay, Lord.
Right.
So,
and I think that's the other side is like you kind of surrendered yourself in a way.
Right.
And you said, okay, well, I'm just going to follow God and whatever this leads. And the thing too is it's so funny because I think for me, the door to fulfillment looked like giving everything up.
Right.
That's how it looked. It looked like literally forfeiting everything.
Right.
And then the funny thing is you open the door and you go, oh, this is everything I ever wanted.
Yes.
And it's like, wow, if I would have just stopped chasing fulfillment and stopped chasing, because that's the thing. It's not that you won't get fulfilled. It's that if you're chasing, there's someone that can fulfill you and there's things that can fill you.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest thing is, are you exactly like that stuff you're chasing is going to fill you.
Right.
But there's some that God can fulfill you. That everything that makes you feel like satisfied, he has.
Right.
And I think a lot of times when we don't chase him behind, so because there's one thing to say, oh, I'm in a career, I'm chasing success, da 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 da. Is he on the other end of that?
Right.
Is it when you look through what you're chasing, do you see God at the end of it? Because if you don't, then that's the problem. Because this is the other thing. If you have to use mental gymnastics to fit God into your lifestyle,
right.
Spoiler alert, it's not going to work out. Yeah, it's not going to work out because if God isn't already in what you're chasing, I hate to break it to you, he's not going to be in it.
Right.
Because if he wasn't in it for the person before you and the person before that person, he's not going to be in it for you because, and it's different for everybody because you say, okay, well, I hear it all the time. Well, that person wasn't called for that. And you go, okay, sure. Are you though? Like 100%. Are you for sure called? Yeah, God. You know, somebody prophesied over me and said I was going to go to the nations. And you're like, okay, well, now the cool thing with all the way where the world works is you can go to the nations in a million different ways.
Right.
Going to the nations doesn't immediately mean that you actually go to the nations. Now you can, but hey, you can send people to nations. You can build things in the you can fund things. There's different things.
Media.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. Well, what's crazy is I know a guy that during COVID he started preaching to a certain place. It was like I forgot exactly where it was, and they would hold services in there and people being saved, and it became a church during COVID. And now he actually went and visited there like 3 years later, and he still preaches all the time there and whatnot. And it's like, it's amazing because for him during a time where you physically could not go to the nations, God opened up a door that he probably did more in that time than he could if he just did a 1 week mission trip. Because that's how people think, oh, well, I'm going to go to the nations. It means a 1 week mission trip. This guy went to the nations and never set foot in that area and had a bigger impact than he could have ever had.
He like built that relationship.
Yeah.
Wow, that's powerful.
And so it's like, you know, I think a lot of times we chase the face value.
Right.
And I think that's what leads us into all kinds of problems.
Right.
Is we it's our interpretation. We chase our interpretation. It's like, so here's the cool thing. You can chase your interpretation as long as God's the end goal. As long as fulfilling God and fulfilling the call of God on your life is the end goal.
Right.
Because I've had a lot of people that would be like, well, what I know is God wants me to be wealthy. So I'm going to go take this business deal that I didn't pray about, that I didn't do it about, I didn't consult my wife about. Scary. I'm going to do this because, hey, you know what? There's wealth over here. Well, that's what it looks like.
Right.
But we all know, we've all watched business deals go wrong, partnerships go wrong. So it's like, yeah, there has to be some level of, are you chasing it just for the opportunity?
Right. What's the motive of your heart?
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing.
For the fame, for the money, for the success, literally people do it just for validation, like a pat on the back.
Oh my goodness, that's
like,
a whole
you
other
did a
thing.
good job, and you're like, what?
Yeah, well, speak that because I know that's something you struggled with for a little while, right? And that's it, and I did too. But can you kind of speak to kind of like how that kind of affected your journey?
Yeah, so I grew up with a stepfather, and my father wasn't really in my life, and so I know it stemmed from that. And so as I got older, I searched for validation in what I was doing, and so I knew the more I could perform and like work a thing, the more validation I would get. So that's why I liked companies that you can like get higher in rank. I love the OTC because you can get higher in rank. The more you did, the more.
Sure. Yeah.
So I love those type of things because I was able to gauge my success through the way that I performed. And so through that, I would always hit a level, and then I'm like, oh, I got there, got the praise, and then I'm like, now what? Like it was just like back to the feeling of loneliness and that void. And so it just got tiring, but literally people do a thing their whole life just to get that validation for a temporary pat on the back. Yeah. And it's a waste of time
100%.
When you can go to God and get the eternal reward for it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, everybody goes through different journeys. And so, like, one thing is if you're in that journey where, like, you're kind of in that position of, like, you know, chasing fulfillment or chasing, you know, people's validation, which could be, you know, oh, hey, you know, this is the thing. A lot of times chasing people's validation feels a lot like, hey, well, I'm just trying to be successful. Hey, well, hey, no, like in my field, you know, people, you know, give me, that's how you get further. Like, I've heard that before too. Like, well, hey, you have to please people to get where, you know, where I'm trying to go, I have to please people. And you're like, yeah, but like, if that's your end goal, then where does that go? Right. Because then you're on the ebb and flow of that person's day. If you're supposed to present or perform on that day and that person, you know, God forbid, you know, they're going through a divorce or they just had a fight or just had, you know, something happen. Then what if they treat you wrong that day because of their personal
right?
And now
you take it so much so.
Yeah, and you built your whole thing up to this point, and then so that's the problem. And we've said it on the show before, and we said it again is if you're accepting praise from people and you're living on that praise, you're gonna die on it.
Right, and that's what would happen. Like the minute I got criticized, I thought I was gonna die. Like,
right.
So I had to break that people pleasing thing, like the fear of man. I had fear of man over fear of God.
Yeah.
And so one day I had that realization. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so ugly. And so it was like, it took like a whole few years to really like focus on that. And then every once in a while it'll try to come back. And I'm like, no. You know, I try to recognize it. But one thing that also really helped was like, my desires change when, like that scripture says, seek first the kingdom of God and all of these things shall be added. And so when I sought the Lord on what he wanted me to do, then my desires started to like match that.
Wow.
And then the other things that I thought I wanted to do or chase after started to fade away. And
that's when you're chasing the right thing.
Right.
You know, those things do start to kind of fade away. And I think that's a good thing to know. Like, you know, if you're chasing the right thing, sometimes the best thing that happens is you start losing friendships that weren't meant to be there. You start
like
losing
half my friends. Like, okay.
Yep. You start losing like different things that like you thought you had and you needed. You thought like, I need this. Those things start to go away. Like, because that's a lot of things. Like when you're chasing something, you realize a lot of times, like, or related like this. If I go on a journey, I know I need water. I know I need food, and then sometimes there's things that aren't necessities that we take along the journey with us that we didn't need,
like more baggage and more.
Exactly. Like, oh, you know, hey, we need 5 days more clothes. You know, like we need. And what ends up happening is you take this stuff with you, and if you're in the right process, God will begin to prune that stuff away.
Right.
And that's the thing is I think that's how you know you're in the right process.
Right.
Is if there's a pruning happening, you're probably on the right track in that sense.
That's good.
But yeah. So one last thing is, so how do you, and I know this is a loaded question, it's crazy, but how do you stay content?
How do you stay content?
Yeah. How do you stay? Because like you get to a place and obviously you want to do more for the Lord. You want to expand ministry. You want to do more for your local church. Want to do more. But how do you stay content where it doesn't become, because I think a lot of times discontentment can fester.
Yes.
When you're fulfilled, when you're content, discontentment can creep in and fester, and then it'll ruin relationships, it'll ruin things, and it'll set you back.
Yeah.
So how have you kind of kept that contentment and also not felt like the need to like, I guess, push things and like make things happen on your own strength?
Right. What really helped me was to be in the Word. And I know that's like cliche, but being in the Word and being in his presence helped me. And me being vulnerable with the Lord. Because like, I feel like sometimes we could be fake, like, oh, I pray this and that. But like when you're sharing your feelings, kind of like we read in Psalms with David, like when you're really sharing your feelings, even though he already knows, he still wants to hear. And so I would just be real. I'm like, God, this person, I don't even think they deserve this thing. Like, and I feel this jealousy. Like, why do I feel that? But I'm like, I don't want to feel that anymore. I literally would talk to him like that. So I'm like, what do I do? And so I would feel it. And then I'd go run and pray in the morning and talk with him about it. Then I'd feel it again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like what do I do?
Yeah.
Until that thing was purged in me. And then one day I would see that person differently or the situation different. So the more I was real with him, and then also having accountability with others. So I would tell my husband and he would help me and pray with me for that situation.
It's good.
And so just always running to the cross with that, with those feelings, with the discontentment. And then one day I realized that my heart posture changed and it went from focusing on what everyone else was doing to like focusing on him and what he wanted me to do. And so now I see people as like, okay, we all have one goal. Yeah. So like if you're doing this thing and it might look the same or it might be similar, like let's do this, girl, boy, whatever. Because we have one common goal. Yeah. And you're different, I'm different. Yeah. We're not the same person, so it's gonna be slightly different.
Right.
And so that's what really helped me.
It's good. Yeah. And basically the biggest thing that helped me too is obviously being in Word, being connected to God. But then the other side of it is letting that like that side of you that like doesn't want other people to succeed kind of start to go away, because I think it's
like a fear, maybe.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like a fear of like you're almost not wanting people to succeed because then it challenges you almost. Yeah. And so kind of embracing like if you feel like for me, I think contentment was if I feel a challenge, not to like attack it, if that makes sense. Like if I feel challenged with where I'm at, because like, okay, someone else is successful, me not to feel like, okay, now I have to match that.
Right.
That's kind of where I realized like, oh, I'm content. Like I'm content. Like, yeah, I don't have to come out of, you know, my contentment to meet your level. You know what I'm saying? And that's the thing, is because a lot of times it's like God's just trying to test you and say, okay, you know, hey, can you celebrate others? Because we've talked about it before on the CA podcast of how to celebrate others and things like that, even if maybe things aren't great between you and them. And I think that's what God's really taught me. For me, what contentment looks like is me not being challenged by other people's success.
Right.
And then when I'm sitting in like, hey, like I can celebrate success, then I'm okay, I'm content.
Yeah.
Like, I'm content.
That's good.
Yeah.
Because I remember a few times with myself, like I'd see someone do the same thing. I'm like, and I wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I can't do it because they're doing it. And I'm like mad and salty at the person. And
sure. Yeah.
And it just all comes down to being able to celebrate them because you're planting those seeds.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and then that's the biggest thing, is like when you can celebrate someone, you know that you've moved past whatever issue you've been dealing with when it comes to man pleasing or trying to level up to somebody. You know you've overcome it when you can celebrate somebody.
Right. So. And now I'm at the point where I'm like, I don't even want that. Like I have so much going on.
Yeah,
another thing on my plate.
Yeah, 100%. So, all right, well, guys, thanks for joining, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.